We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insight, new style, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Monday, February 17th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and thank you for tuning in to News Generation. Joining us today is Ki Kim.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Morning.
And Guri Put and Guri Put.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Monday means it's time to talk about topics trending among Korea's younger generation. Now, if you're watching us live on our Arirang YouTube channel, we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's topic because today we're talking about how young people consume news and how these habits are changing. So we're going to start by getting a sense of how our panelists consume the news. We're once again back with our short O and X session. So please raise your O or X sign depending on what you think about each statement. So we're going to start with our first statement of the day. Number one, I make an effort to watch or read the news every day. What do you think? 1, 2, 3. Both? Oh, okay. Let's start with Yuki, although it's quite an obvious answer because you are
Yes.
a news presenter.
Exactly. So my job is to deliver news. So of course, it's sort of a must for me that I watch or read news every day. My notification for some of the major news outlets applications is always on. I sign up for email subscriptions for some of this foreign media because I sometimes also work as a foreign correspondent. Quite annoying sometimes because you see 100 messages on your phone all the time. But the more I read, the more I know about the world.
All right. So Ki is indeed catching up and following the news very passionately, right?
Yes.
And what about you, Grace? You also choose O.
Yes, I'm also O because staying up to date with what's going on around the world in economy, society, all facets is directly related to my work, like Ki. So because it's directly related to how I make a living, it's actually a chore for me, but I have come to enjoy it over the years because now I actually understand what they're talking about on the news.
All right, we're starting off on a very good note today. Both our panelists choosing O for the first statement. Let's move on with our second one. Number two, I still get my news through traditional sources, whether should we say legacy media outlets like TV or newspapers. 1, 2, 3. In between?
I'm in the middle.
In the middle, okay.
Yes.
Let's start with Ki again. Okay.
Because I mostly watch news on TV or on my phone. And in my house, the news channel is always on. When I come to work, there's always newspapers on the desk. And I try to read them. The things I like about the traditional paper newspapers, they're just like books. Holding newspaper with my hands and turning the page with my fingers makes me feel like I'm actually reading something. And also another thing I like about reading a newspaper, paper newspaper, is that you get to come across the news that you're not expected, something that's surprising, very interesting while reading other articles.
Because all sections of the news are in one
Yeah,
newspaper,
because it's
right?
there, and then like I'm looking at the papers, and all of a sudden some headlines stand out. Then I just read that article. So because in a smartphone, you get to when you click on certain news, then you only get to see that news.
Right,
whereas you know, the whole regular paper, you get to read like whole section and every part of it. So I enjoy that more.
I think I also still get the news mostly from television news or newspaper news. So I think that I'm more of a legacy media person. And Grace, why did you choose in the middle?
Like Ki, I get my news from traditional sources like TV and newspaper also, although I get more so from TV. But I feel like these days I'm looking through my phone, social media, and like whatever headlines that pop up, I'm more prone to just kind of scrolling through and getting the updates on
And seeing the breaking news alerts?
Yeah, it's easier to just access it because it keeps popping up. And I think it's very interesting to kind of look at the comments on that particular news story and see how people are reacting real time.
Get the public opinion.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
both, yeah.
Okay, then we're going to move on to our final statement. Number 3, if I come across news that makes me kind of uncomfortable, I tend to stop reading or watching. What do you do? 1, 2, 3. X and X. Why Ki?
Because the more uncomfortable I am, for example, a disaster or unfortunate loss of life or lives or political turmoil, if it's big news, I dig deeper because I try to read or watch all different channels depending on, it doesn't matter which political side they're on, and I get to know more about the story. And it doesn't matter how disturbing or emotional the story is, I just have to watch all of them because one, I'm always curious because it's my job to actually find out what is going on. And number two, I'm always curious about the truth. So
You need to get to the bottom
yeah,
of it.
I need to see every single information, piece it together. But I'm trying to try not to be biased about any fact.
Is this the same reason for you, Grace?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of news content, I know it's not going to show me like the full violent, gory
graphic,
details that I actually have a hard time watching in terms of like if I'm watching TV shows or movies. I know that for news, it's just going to deliver the news on kind of a hard factual basis. So it's easier for me to consume news just because I have that trust. And it allows me to consume uncomfortable news subjects more objectively, which is less emotionally draining for me personally.
Okay, well, thank you both for sharing your opinions on how you consume the news. So we're going to zoom out and talk about the bigger picture now, which is the overall news consumption trends among young people. So it feels like the way we consume the news has shifted dramatically over the past few years, right, Grace?
That's right. In the past, it was the norm to get our news through more traditional forms like the daily newspaper or radio and TV. Since the emergence of the internet, however, people started to get their news online, and news outlets also started picking up on these trends and created online news portals. But we're seeing another shift in trends with millennials and Gen Z getting their news through social media, short form, and online communities rather than through existing methods. It seems like they aren't very interested in how the news is delivered in the rather bland, rigid, and even boring ways, which also makes it difficult to soak in the information and stay focused. News outlets, again, are responding to the shifting demands of the younger generation by looking for new ways to produce and deliver news in shorter, more enjoyable ways that are easier to consume. And we can find examples of this fresh type of content from news agencies in Korea like SBS, 동아일보, and JTBC.
Right, and if we look at foreign news outlets these days, we can see them streaming their news live on YouTube channels and etc. So definitely more sources that we can get the news from. So Grace just explained how new media platforms have pushed legacy media outlets like TV and newspapers, which we mentioned earlier, sort of into the background. But new data shows that news consumption among young people in general is declining overall. Nonetheless, the method that they consume the news. So could you please tell us more about that?
Sure. According to the Korea Press Foundation, people in their 20s and 30s are simply not into watching news anymore. Their research shows that the decline in news consumption in online video platforms. So if you take a look at the screen right now, so let's take a look at this picture. The online video platform usage alone, like YouTube or OTT platform, Koreans in their 20s from the year 2022, 23, 24 show a sharp drop from 34% to 31% to a whopping 21%. So you can see almost a 10% drop there. And those who are in their 30s are similar, 34 to 35 and to 24%, also nearly a 10% drop. And other age groups were similar though, 40s, they saw 5% drop, and people in their 50s saw nearly 7% drop. So the Korea Press Foundation presumed that this is just not a fad, but it's an ongoing trend. People are not reading news on the internet either. Now, this research was conducted before the martial law imposition, so things might have changed now a bit in Korea. Yet their analysis diagnosed that distrust in media in general was the main contributing factor for this outcome.
I see. So it is very striking that those in their 20s and 30s, they are turning away from consuming the news. So it always comes down to the question of why. So why do you think this is causing this? Why do you think more young people are turning away from watching or hearing the news?
Yeah, well, if you think about it, there's just a vast amount of information that's generated online these days. And for millennials and Gen Z who equally value cost efficiency and time efficiency more than the older generations, they're more prone to avoiding traditional ways of consuming news, which requires investing lots of time and energy into comprehending the subject matter. Naturally, they're going to be more attracted to news stories that are shorter and easier to understand. They also prefer to pick and choose the types of news that they consume because they have their interests, they want it to be relatable, and they want it to be useful to their lives. On top of this, another striking difference from the older generations, younger people nowadays have access to a greater variety of platforms, which in a sense blurs the lines between actual news stories and just vast amounts of information. Essentially, news refers specifically to information about current events, meaning it's time sensitive and focuses on recent happenings. And information is a broader term that encompasses any facts, data, or knowledge about a subject, which can be timeless and not necessarily related to current events.
Which could be the reason why they are not tuning into the news with compared to the past, and them being more selective. What could be some other reasons, Keith?
Well, according to a research center in journalism in Oxford, UK, there are so many people who naturally avoid news just because it's uncomfortable. Around the world, there are about 36% of them. They like positive news. And when they see any sort of issue, they seek for the solutions. So meaning they want someone to offer a simple answer for them for any sort of questions. And they're not interested in daily news report on the media outlets unless, like Grace was saying, the topic is somewhat relatable to their daily lives. Many of us are sick and tired of shocking, rather sad news, and some news just raise conflicts. So it's an understandable phenomenon where, as we suffer from the wave of information with unforeseeable future, lack of trust in media, and emotionally exhausting events taking place around the world.
So young news consumers feeling kind of fatigued towards news could be another reason why.
Exactly.
All right, so to get a clear picture, we also asked our viewers, do they watch or read the news regularly and how? Let's take a look at some of their responses. Our first response for this Monday is by JellyK126. I read and watch the news every day, but not on TV. I watch it at double speed on YouTube or sometimes just check the headlines. That's why I'm subscribed to the Arirang news channel. Our second comment, Paolo Vitera 2020. Yes, I watch the news regularly from some countries. It's good to have a general idea of how things are going in different places. Our last comment, the Power Ranger 200, definitely Arirang News and KBS World News Today. I watch local news in Canada too. Well, thank you for giving all your comments for this Monday. Now, to better understand this change, we're going to connect with a journalist based in Singapore after a short break. Stay with us.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us on this Monday morning is Megan Morris, Deputy Bureau Chief at Business Insider in Singapore. Welcome to the show, Megan.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Megan, we've talked about how news consumption is dropping among young people here in Korea in the previous part of our show. So, I want to ask you, is this also happening in other countries, for example, where you're at in Singapore?
Yes, I'm based here in Singapore, and the majority of Business Insider's readership is in the US. So we keep a keen eye on global media trends. Our readers tend to be millennials and older Gen Z, and what we see from them is a real difference from generations before in terms of how they're accessing their news. Now, really big picture, Gen Z audiences get more content than ever before. They're consuming more media, big picture. But the share of news within that media bucket is much smaller than some of their counterparts. We also see them coming to news differently. We see that for older generations, much more of them come to news through apps, websites directly. We see more Gen Z and millennials coming to us and other media outlets through search and through social media in particular. That's probably no surprise, but it does mean a big shift in how news organizations across the world need to think about how they reach these potential audiences or current audiences in the first place.
Thank you for your insight, Megan. Extending your thoughts, and like I've mentioned before, some argue that declining trust in the media is contributing to this sort of shift. So what do you think, and how are news organizations trying to win back their audience?
Measures of public sentiment in the U.S. show that trust in all kinds of institutions is eroding right now. That's in medicine, in academics, in the news. So this is not a news-only problem, but it is a very pressing problem for us as an industry to make sure that we're setting up the news audiences of today and in the future to be media literate, to be able to separate fact from fiction, not just on our own programs, but in the world around them as they're bombarded with even more media. So we do see a lack of trust in this increasingly fragmented environment. People are hearing many more voices, and many news consumers say that they're really overwhelmed trying to sort out what's real, what's not, who's trying to just sell them something, and who's giving them real information. So this is a real problem for news organizations globally, and we think that it will only get worse as institutional trust in all sorts of big picture institutions, including in the government, erodes.
So looking ahead, Megan, what strategies then would you suggest for media outlets to stay relevant and connect better with younger generations?
News organizations need to understand that the old model of if we build it, they will come just doesn't apply anymore. As a millennial, I have not had cable television for my entire life, so I have never been quick to turn on CNN or any of the other programs that were often in the background of my home growing up. We do have some TV in the office, so I see Bloomberg and CNBC and things like that, but the media needs to come to me because I don't have it on in the background. I'm not being kind of a passive news consumer like many in generations before me were. That means that news organizations need to be very thoughtful about going to readers and reaching them where they are, or audiences, readers, listeners, viewers, etc. That means that we need to be clear when we're reaching audiences, for example, on social media, about how they can find out more and continue learning more about that story on other platforms. We know that people are really keen to engage with media when it comes to them and when it's in digestible formats. My organization, Business Insider, has long had a practice of putting 3 bullet points on the top of our stories. These bullet points are just 100 words each, and they give the reader the really big picture of what's going on in that story. For busy people, think if you're reading this on the train, on your way to work, or at lunch, that can give you all the information you need to be informed about that topic, or it can whet your appetite for more so that you can jump into that longer story. We see that that's a great way to engage people because it helps both the people who don't have too much time and those who want to see if this is a story that they want to spend the time spending 10 or 15 minutes on. So I think thinking about how we package information on the page or on air, as well as how that information reaches consumers, are possibly 2 of the most critical issues facing news organizations across the world right now.
Well, we have a lot on our shoulders. All right, Megan Morris, Deputy Bureau Chief at Business Insider in Singapore. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks.
Thank you. Right, ending off, I would like to ask this question to our panelists. How do you think news consumption will continue to evolve in the years to come?
Yeah, well, I went to one of my go-to restaurants in Yeouido Island, and there's no other customers there. And since it was a small restaurant, I could overhear what the owner of the restaurant was watching on YouTube. It was just a news channel run by a political idealist, and I didn't say anything at the time, but some of the information that YouTuber was citing was clearly not true. But the owner actually bought it, believed in it, and was telling that story to his wife. So one of the main reasons many people shifted from the conventional channel to YouTube channels or internet news is probably and the decline in reading news on conventional media are probably because we lost the trust in them, like we were talking about it. And there's no standard or strong media outlets as used to a couple of decades ago. So now what we need to do is we need to win back their trust. You know, we need to provide better quality of information. And I've been doing this for quite a long time. So I guess in the future, superbly personalized news service where it shows the readers what they want to read or watch would gain popularity.
I think that can be done from the news producer side and from the news consumer sides. Maybe we can work more on media literacy so that they can differentiate what is news and what is not news.
What is story or what is news?
Right, definitely. What do you think, Grace?
Actually, while delving into this topic of digital consumption habits of the younger generation over the past week, I learned that researchers found that brand names and industry accolades don't necessarily guarantee the credibility of legacy newsrooms. Because young consumers grew up not just on the internet, but in sort of like this social first environment, actual experiences of online personalities are often more appealing to them than hard news reports. As we can see in citizen journalism in the Ukraine, I think news consumption culture will evolve into one where individual citizen journalists who build trust with audiences because they're actually living out these stories in real time are going to become a major way for news stories to spread among young people into broader communities around the world. So in a way, news is becoming a more social and conversational activity, which is definitely different from the existing ways that news has been presented.
All right, and that was our discussion today on the changing news consumption among our generation. And that's all we have for this Monday's episode of News Gen, but we will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks to Ki Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Grace Park.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for starting your week with us, and hope you join us tomorrow as well. We are
News Generation.